Good morning. Thank you for joining today's HALI Manufacturing and International Trade Committee meeting. Thank you for your time and thank you for joining. Today we'll talk about future cannabis industry, as it is something new for our state. And before we get into the subject matter, first of all, my name is Kevin Devecioğlu. I am a co-chair of the manufacturing committee. I am facilitating meetings with my colleague, with Ron Lowland. I think he is also connected today. And together we run meetings for manufacturing industry as well as international trade. So basically our mission is to help manufacturers thrive in Long Island area. And for this, we organize meetings, informative and educational meetings for different subjects, for quality management, manufacturing practices, use cases, and with other subject matters. For example, today we'll talk about cannabis industry, which is something new for our state. Moving forward, as you know, we also organized different meetings in previous months. Some of them actually were about international trade as well, which is part of our committee's mission. We talk about how to do business with Vietnam. We talk about how to do business with Brazil, China, as well as we talk about standards and fundamentals of international markets, for example. So that was also that was an educational meeting as well for our committee followers and HALI members as well. I will continue meeting monthly basis, as you know. A side note for you, we have a LinkedIn group, and this LinkedIn group, we put it together to communicate with each other, basically. So please register and join our group for our manufacturing and international trade committee related subjects. You can also post your content as well on our group. So I'd like to invite you to join our LinkedIn group. Let me see if Tony Joy is here. Let me see. Okay, so I don't see Tony Joy. So for HALI meetings, we have a very active website, and there are events coming up for HALI community, as you know. So the best thing to do is to visit our website, HALI's website, and follow up events coming up, events for HALI, as well as other committee meetings that are very, very active in HALI community. So before I jump to the subject matter, Ron, is there anything that you'd like to share with us before we go into the panel discussion?
Yeah, good morning, Kevin. Morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us here on this beautiful summer day. I know a lot of people are on vacation and out enjoying the summer, so continue to do that. I wanted to mention a couple of events coming up in the fall. In September, we're going to be having a joint meeting with APIX, which is the supply chain professional organization. And we're going to talk about supply chain disruptions, right? How many companies out there are complaining about, man, I just can't get things out of the ports anymore. The traffic's all clogged up. We don't have drivers, having all kinds of upside down supply chain issues. So we're going to have a panel talking about that, including Rob Bordonero, who's the chief purchasing officer at Orlicon Metco, as well as some other esteemed manufacturers talking about how they're handling disruptions in supply chain. And then the big event of the year for manufacturers, we have Manufacturing Day coming up. That's going to be October the 1st. We're going to go virtual again this year. As you may have heard, the CDC is recommending that we put our mask back on again. So we're going to stay virtual for a while until we kind of get the clearance to get back into person. But we'd love to have you join us. This is a chance for manufacturers to open their doors, let students in particular, their future workforce know about the great careers available in manufacturing, whether they're college bound or non-college bound. So we invite students, parents, teachers, guidance counselors. We're going to have some colleges talking about their programs for manufacturers. And, last year we had 200 plus registered, and about 80 manufacturers, 60 schools. So we're looking for another great event on October 1st. So join us then. Be well, be safe. Safe travels.
Thank you, Ron. I appreciate it. Okay, so I think we can get started with our panel discussion. So we actually have experts in cannabis industry from different fields, and we like to start these discussions in cannabis industry in our market, in our state, in Long Island, because that is something actually very popular subject in business communities, and it's going to be more and more important for Long Island economy as well moving forward. So we will have a series of meetings moving forward about cannabis industry. And this is the first meeting of this series. Today, we'll talk about how to get ready for cannabis industry from the point of regulations, legal requirements, as well as digital operations in cannabis industry, for example. And we'll also learn about a cannabis company we also invited today, and we'll also learn about some best practices as well in cannabis industry as well. So for that, let me introduce our panelists as a start. So we have Arthur Yarmash with us. He is a partner at, okay, we have, all right, that sounds good. Okay, so we have Arthur Yarmash with us. He's a partner at Campolo, Middleton, and McCormick. LLP is a corporate lawyer who provides practical business-focused guidance to clients. He has represented Long Island and New York City companies in countless transactions, from routine to complex. Arthur chairs the firm's cannabis law practice group, providing critical guidance for cannabis businesses, entrepreneurs, and service providers on a wide range of matters in this emerging market. His work with cannabis businesses includes entity formation, industry-specific agreements, regulatory compliance, and licensing, as well as commercial leasing matters and mergers and acquisitions. Arthur, I'd like to welcome to our panel. Thank you for joining. Also, we have Martin Caliph with us. Martin is also very active in Long Island business community. He actually started his career at 3M company. And in 2005, he founded his company with his partner, Paperless Solutions. And he's been helping companies going paperless in this digital age, as well as scanning services, and also helping companies adapting digital transformation. So we also have Marty with us from Paperless Solutions. Marty, welcome to our panel. Thank you for joining. Appreciate it. Also with us today, we have Joel Halvorson. Joel is an experienced and resourceful business process and technology consultant with more than 30 years of professional experience. He has a broad range of industry experience, including utility, energy, telecommunications, cannabis, and public sector entities at the municipal, county, and federal levels. He has particular interest in analyzing, designing, and implementing business process improvement initiatives with an emphasis on the role of technology to increase efficiency and reduce costs. Welcome, Joel, to our panel. Thank you for joining. So if you notice, we have actually experts here in their fields. So we'll learn about cannabis law and regulations. We'll learn about how to go paperless and operate digitally in cannabis industry. We'll also learn from Joel. Joel is actually based in Colorado, for information, and also he is also working very close with cannabis industry, and we learn from a real cannabis company, Panacea Life Sciences from Colorado, as to how they are doing in Colorado and how they, what type of challenges they had before, how they overcome, and what we can learn as New York companies and maybe potential New York cannabis operators, companies from Panacea Life Sciences as well. So we can also learn a lot from Joel in practices of cannabis industry. So having said that, I'd like to invite Arthur Yarmash from Campolo, Middleton, and McCormick to our virtual stage to learn about cannabis law regulations for cannabis companies and for those who like to invest and get ready in cannabis industry, so that we can learn from Arthur. Arthur, I'll stop sharing, so maybe you can start sharing if that's all right.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. Just bear with me for 1 second. Let me tee this up.
Sure. Also, just a side note, each panelist of ours, you have 20 minutes. And once 5 minutes left, I'll let you know there is 5 minutes left. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Kevin, for the introduction. My role today is to talk a little bit about what's happening in New York regarding the cannabis industry. Cannabis isn't new to New York. New York has had a fairly, limited medical marijuana program for a number of years now, where the industry was limited to an extremely few number of participants that were allowed to sell medical marijuana for very limited medical purposes. And so the industry has been kind of coming into play for a number of years now, with manufacturers and retailers really looking to grow and develop that beyond just a limited capacity. Has been a very aggressive push with the New York governor's office and the legislature to expand it. And as everyone is probably aware at this point, in April of this year, New York passed the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act. And the act accomplished a couple of things that's really going to impact everyone across the board. The first and the most obvious and the most headline-driven piece of the legislation is that marijuana is now legal for recreational use, right? And so everyone across New York is permitted to use marijuana, in most scenarios, and we'll talk about what is still restricted. But what's more important to businesses in New York is that one, the recreational use will significantly impact HR and workforce policies and procedures, right? Because now this is another component that businesses need to be thinking about, be considerate of. The other piece is essentially the initial and beginning framework of, essentially a brand new industry, from starting at the most basic level, which is growth cultivation, all the way through retail and online sales. And so there's a lot of movement. There's a lot of things being, happening right now in anticipation of this industry. Now, one thing that we don't know right now, and this will be sort of a repetitive theme here, is we are at the infancy here, right? And so we don't know a lot of things yet. The regulations for how the various industries will be managed, will be overseen, all that is in process. All we know is that here's the framework for the industry, and now the new Office of Cannabis Control Board and the Office of Cannabis Management will be responsible over the next year to 18 months to really create the framework, so that anyone interested in expanding and growing into this industry, getting involved at different levels, would have an understanding of what it is that they need to do, how to get involved, what compliance requirements are, and all that. So a big chunk of that is still not available. And so we wait on those regulations while at the same time, plan and prepare for it. So, jumping in, kind of give a little bit of detail as to what's legal right now. Adults over 21 can possess up to 3 ounces of cannabis and 24 grams of concentrated cannabis. That is what's legal immediately as of April of this year. And anyone in New York State is able to avail themselves of of these new regulations. So for anyone here, who's got employees and who have, the employees are now allowed to do this legally, right? And whether or not they were doing it before and how it impacts work, that's one thing. That the point is now, it's a protected right, so to speak. There's certain limits to that. Obviously, driving under the influence is still prohibited. Operating motor vehicles is still prohibited. Anywhere where smoking tobacco is prohibited, that remains a prohibition on cannabis as well. And so the key issue for a lot of the businesses that we see is, how does it impact our workforce, right? And so the thing that's been driving our involvement and our support of the businesses we work with today, and is really helping navigate how to how to update policies, how to deal with employees and issues that are going to inevitably come up now that this is sort of now out in the open, right? So again, cannabis is not new to the world. The percentages are pretty staggering as far as the amount of people across the state that have historically used cannabis, except now it is open. And so what do we need to do as employers, and how do we advise employers to to really address the issues that are relevant? So the thing to keep in mind is that it is now protected activity, right? So employers may not make employment decisions based on employee use of cannabis, right? And again, it's not a broad, unrestricted right. It's limited where cannabis use is not allowed on duty. So that's still something that protects our businesses. And also any use has to be off premises and not using any property or equipment of the employer. And so this was part of a change in labor law specifically addressing this issue. And the other critical component here is when deciding whether to hire someone or anyone that's hired, when finding out that someone has had a past marijuana related conviction, that may not be taken into account when making an employment decision. Now, many businesses do background checks, and depending on the business and what the specific job is, it's important to continue to do background checks, to do drug tests, and to do all the things that many businesses have done over the years. Except now there's this other component, another consideration that we have to think about. And anyone who's making hiring decisions, would probably know about how to address past criminal convictions in making those decisions, where when finding out about a conviction and making a decision based on it, there are certain criteria that employers generally have had to think about and evaluate. Now, marijuana convictions specifically cannot be a reason for not hiring someone. However, there are certain, to this point, identified criteria where marijuana use and convictions can be used as a decision in making, regarding an employee. The first one is when obviously when the law prohibits or requires that no marijuana use. And the best example I could give of this is, there's certain, warehouse operators, certain licensed drivers, delivery personnel that have certain special licenses where drug use may not be permitted, heavy equipment operators. There are a lot of laws, and all of those remain intact. And so anyone who's involved in that type of work, nothing changes for them, right? Those people are still subject to the same restrictions that they've always had in place. And so there's not a whole lot of concern there. So that's still allowed. Marijuana is still marijuana use is still something that could be considered in those scenarios. The other scenario is where it affects the job itself, right? So if you have for example, on a construction site, you have a flag person, right, who's responsible for being alert and aware of what's happening. That's a position potentially where we could say, you are not allowed to use marijuana or use cannabis, where it would impact your job and worker safety. And so that's taken into account. And just to be clear, again, and to reiterate, the point and the issue here is, on the job use is still prohibited. It's what a person does off the job. And the best way to think about it is, it's equatable to alcohol use, right? Many employees, typically go home, have a drink after work, and no one ever bats an eye or ever says anything. marijuana and cannabis use is really being put in the same category, right? So usage at home is okay, usage on the job is not, and usage at home is also not okay in certain job criteria. And then the third enumerated item where employers can prohibit cannabis use is if it will impact any sort of contract, right? So, especially contracts relating with the government, whether it's state or federal, and so in those scenarios, we are still, as employers allowed to, put prohibitions in place. So the issue with internal policies, right? And before this, many employers have had broad policies and broad restrictions against drug use in the workforce. In some cases, folks have policies that prohibit drug use outside the workforce. That may need to be addressed now. Things like carving out cannabis use, maybe something that some policies would need to be addressed. As far as folks that drug test employees, especially in the scenario of an incident or any occurrence, aside from insurance restrictions, the process for addressing an incident now is, or identifying an employee who is intoxicated on the job is now, a little different. There is no impairment test for cannabis. It does not exist. There are companies that have been developing this, and then what I'm talking about specifically is identifying whether a person is impaired at the moment that they are being tested. And this is a key difference between alcohol in the workforce, where blood alcohol content test can tell with immediacy whether a person is intoxicated or not and how intoxicated they are. For cannabis, this doesn't exist, and many states that have legalized recreational marijuana use have struggled with this issue, and so have many employers because, again, the typical scenario is that an incident occurs. Sometimes policies mandate that a person involved in an incident gets immediately tested for impairment, and with cannabis, the test will not be clear as to whether or not the person is impaired at the moment or whether they were impaired 2 days ago. The tests that do exist show that the person may have been impaired at some point, but there's no testing available today. So what companies have been doing, and now is probably a good time to sort of reevaluate and rethink how the policies are structured, is to create what's called a reasonable suspicion test, right? Where if an employee presents certain symptoms indicative of cannabis impairment, that has been identified as sufficient to determine whether or not a person is impaired. Now, is it a perfect test? Is it absolutely objective every time? It's not. And so what we advise our clients and companies that we work with is to, create framework that would be as objective as possible, right? And so identify criteria that identifies impairment. So things like delayed reaction, bloodshot or watery eyes, sleepiness, and have more than one person potentially be involved in evaluating an employee, especially one involved in an incident, about their potential level of impairment. And part of the process is keeping strong documentation, because again, what would typically happen is if an employee is deemed to be impaired, especially at work, or especially more so when the employee is involved in an incident, those things are subject to reprimand, termination, and depending on the severity of the issue. And so the framework, the legal framework, is that employers are not allowed to discriminate against folks that are lawfully using cannabis at home. And so when making a determination based on this, keeping clear and accurate records on this issue is an important part of it, and making sure that, our businesses are prepared to evaluate such a scenario, because again, this is something that you never think you need to deal with it until you need to deal with it. And so being prepared and having a plan in place for addressing this is sort of a key thing right now, as it will certainly be a bigger issue over time as the cannabis industry continues to grow and expand in New York. So to kind of shift from the employment process, I'm going to speak a little bit about what is going to be available for businesses out there, right? Especially ones that see opportunity to get into the cannabis industry at different levels, right? So, the key thing that was authorized as of April of this year is personal use. What hasn't been authorized is essentially everything else, right? Which is the industry of sale, right? So we're sort of in this gray unknown area right now where individuals can use cannabis, but they can't legally buy it anywhere. And so it creates a bit of a paradox in and of itself, but that's where we are. And so while we wait for the regulations on the different licensing and industry permissions, we have some idea of what it will look like, right? So obviously there's going to be some at home for personal use cultivation that would be permitted. Again, that's not permitted yet. That will be in effect, and the regulations for that will come over time. And so again, we wait on the regulations, but beyond personal use is industry. And this is just some information again for personal use that's been identified to this point, but we wait on beyond as to how businesses will be affected, right? One thing to note is that the law does allow municipalities, and this now relates to retail distribution. So essentially what we're talking about are cannabis cafes that would be potentially authorized under the new cannabis legislation, is that local municipalities have the ability to pass local laws to opt out of allowing cannabis retail in their jurisdiction. And the deadline for doing so is December of this year. So there's been some buzz about, what parts of Long Island will look to opt out. And the decision is really being driven twofold, right? One is the moral aspect, right, where some have identified the issue as morally unacceptable, and so some municipalities are going to be making decisions based on that. The other component, of course, is the business side of it, right? And with retail cannabis operations, there will be significant taxes that will be that will be passed through to each municipality in the range of I believe about 3% of sales will be allocated to the municipalities and where the businesses are located. And so some are making decisions saying, hey, look, we need the revenue, we need the tax revenue for our business, and we're okay with cannabis being sold at retail in our in our town. Others have said no way, and so identified a few that have publicly spoken up about it. Now realistically, I don't believe from what I've seen where anyone's actually passed any sort of legislation to opt out. So there's a lot of talk for now. We'll have to, this is also one of those wait and see things where we'll have to see how it plays out and where it goes, and whether some of these towns that have already said they're interested in opting out, whether they're actually going to do it. Town of Riverhead, in the last few weeks has said that they will not be opting out, right? That they, that's sort of where they are headed. Others have said otherwise. And so, in addition to opting out, municipalities are allowed to also pass certain restrictions, and what those will look like, again, we'll also have to wait and see. So now to talk a little bit about licensing, right? So there are several different licensing available from Cultivator, which is a business that would grow plants, all the way through to retail, which is a business that will publicly sell to the end user, right? In this case, the end user being all of us here who wish to be involved and use cannabis. So there will be a limit on licensing, right? And so the big unknown right now, the big black hole of information for us is how many licenses will be available, how will businesses get in line, how will they be get priority, right? Because anyone who wants to be involved in the industry is going to want to be as close to first in line as possible. And so one thing that has been identified is that there will be a social equity component, right? Where it's unclear whether the social equity component will apply to all the licenses or just to some, possibly just to micro business, possibly just to retail. But 50% of the licenses are intended to be allocated towards certain, minority women-owned groups, distressed folks, disabled veterans, and the impacted by cannabis prohibition is really intended to target and support folks that have had marijuana-related convictions in the past that will now be allowed to have priority seating towards getting licensed in the industry. There will also be, for this group, counseling and business advisory services, as well as extremely discounted capital to get their business going. So to kind of touch on what the licenses are and what they what they are to be used for, and there's information where businesses may not hold a bunch of different licenses. So for example, if you are a cultivator, you may not also be a retailer. And so the intent there is to be able to separate and independently create businesses and industries to grow that way, and really to allow more open access to the different industries that folks want to get involved in. So a cultivator license will allow businesses to harvest plants, and essentially, it's the grower license, right? Where it's for businesses that want to grow and cultivate, right? So farmers and businesses like that. A nursery license is intended for businesses that want to create the products that will be ultimately cultivated. So things like seeding, things like supply, and all the items and equipment that will be necessary for that will come to businesses that are obtain a nursery license. A processor license is intended for businesses that are that would be extracting concentrated cannabis, right? So these are for the various oil products and all the different other things that can be processed chemically from cannabis plants, right? And so again, the goal is for all these businesses and new industries and really existing industries to grow into and work together to create an entire brand new industry going forward. Distributor license will allow for wholesale distribution, to retailers and other businesses. A cooperative license is a little more involved, where it allows for different aspects of some of these other licenses to come together. And so some of the folks looking to get involved in the industry will be looking at the cooperative licenses. And then micro business is a license where there are going to be certain limitations on how much revenue a business has. So it's really intended for smaller smaller businesses with certain revenue limitations as to how much they're able to uh, uh, produce. And then we have the retail dispensary, which is going to be the more public facing cafe type retail distribution and on-site as well. And so retail is walk in and walk out. On-site is the cafe type license. And again, those are those are the ones that are going to be public facing, where anyone can walk in and walk out with cannabis product. And then just the last couple is delivery and the distribution license. And so the key thing to think about with the licenses is what the application process will be. And the only way to think about it is it's going to be similar to the way alcohol licenses are currently issued to alcohol businesses, which is there's going to be a full background check, personal information, financial information, fingerprinting, and really questions that focus on good moral character, right? So this isn't open to folks that have not historically demonstrated as being morally correct, and the criminal aspect will certainly be addressed in the regulations. And so again, this is the framework as we're aware of it today, with April being when the law first was passed. We're probably looking at sometime by next summer before we know what a lot of this really means about how businesses can get involved, and about what the impact will be. But the employment stuff for all of you that have employees that have employment policies, all of that is currently active and needs to be addressed, and really something to focus on today, to make sure that anything that is done and any incidents are addressed properly now within this new framework. So that's all I have for today. I'm happy to answer questions, later, Kevin, whenever you think is appropriate. So,
Sure.
I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Arthur. Very informative, very educational for all of us. I mean, we have a lot to learn, and it was actually very helpful for us. Thank you so much for your presentation. I am sure there are questions from our attendees. I'm also getting some messages from my private chat box on Zoom. So what we'll do is we have a Q&A session at the end. So we'll ask questions to our panelists, and we'll ask them to address. So please hold on to your questions for now. I know you have many. And then we'll ask questions to Arthur and our panelists towards the end of our committee meeting. Great, Arthur, thank you so much. So please stay with us, and we're gonna have questions for you, and we'll appreciate if you address it in a Q&A session. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely, thank you.
So let me take over the screen, and we can continue our panel discussion. These months HALM Manufacturing and International Trade Committee meeting. Okay, there it is. All right, good. Time-wise, we are doing well. So now I'd like to invite Marty Khalif from Paperless Solutions. So we heard from Arthur about legal requirements, about law, what is coming up, licensing, very important subject matters that we all have to learn in the cannabis industry moving forward. Now let's talk about being paperless. I know Marty is very active and getting more and more active in cannabis industry in New York State, and meeting more cannabis companies and seeing their challenges from operational point of view, especially being paperless and utilizing technology nowadays. So let's learn from Marty about being paperless, going paperless in cannabis industry, why it is important, how can we actually achieve it. So I'd like to invite Marty to our virtual stage. Marty, I'll stop sharing so you can start sharing your screen. Also, please make sure you unmute your microphone so we can hear you. Marty, your microphone is muted.
Can you hear
Okay.
me now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Hi, Kevin. Thank you, everybody, for inviting me to this opportunity to talk about going paperless. So, let me start off by sharing my screen here.
Looks good. Thank you.
Okay. So,
Marty, you have 20 minutes. I'll let you know when 5 minutes left. Thank you.
great. Thank you. So, we're going to talk about document management in the digital age and how it's going to also affect the cannabis and the hemp industry. So, let me tell you a little about our company. We started out in 2005 providing on site and off site scanning services. Uh, we have the capability of scanning about any type of document, whether it's documents, x rays, engineering drawings, artwork, it really doesn't matter. We have a facility in Bohemia as well as bringing people on site to do scanning. Most companies like the idea of coming on site because it provides security to the files. It also allows for them not having to pack documents and send them out. If we have questions, you're right there. If you have questions, we're right there. So it works out pretty good. But we found out that we were only providing half a service because once we scan the documents, you need a way to retrieve it. So we decided to become a VAR, evaluated reseller for document management software. So we looked around for many companies. We looked for companies that the most important thing to us was not only the product but the support. So we've been able to be successful selling not only scanning services but software, document management software. We have customers who are doctors, lawyers, insurance companies, financial organizations, manufacturers, retail, any business that stores paper, needs paper. Going with document management is a terrific way of going. And if you ever decide you want to go paperless, we have our team. We come in, we talk about your business process, try and learn about your business so that we set up the best system for you. So, and it's a free, no obligation type of charge. So let's talk about going paperless. Uh, Going paperless, you start by scanning a document, you create a PDF formatted image. We've all heard the term PDF. What does it actually mean? It's actually an ISO standard, meaning a portable document format. There are really 6 basic standard PDF formats. The 2 most important are the PDF or PDFA. Most people haven't heard of the PDFA unless you're really with the government. The PDFA is its longevity and reliability. The thing about the PDFA is that it limits some of the features you can do. You can't attach audio or video or encryption, external references, or external fonts. By doing not adding anything to it, doesn't create corruption to the document. And the good thing about PDFs and PDFA, they're not easily alterable. They can be altered, but you need special software to do it. Most standard PDF ways of viewing a PDF could be the PDF or PDFA. It doesn't make a difference, and there's no real noticeable difference in generating the output file. So you're probably saying, just no, you're not going to take my paper. I like working with paper. I know document management, people like it, but you're just saying no. Well, we understand that because as a toddler, you were taught to draw on paper. You were given paper and pencil and you scribbled. As you got older, you became real Van Goghs and Rembrandts, and you learned to express yourself with wall art. And then in school, we all handed in paper reports on paper. And even now, today, when you go home, you like to touch and hold the paper. So we understand that paper has been your way of life, and there's reasons why you don't want it. So the question is, why go paperless? Well, let me give you some interesting facts about paper. Office paper has tripled since the introduction of the computer. Computers started entering the business in about 1970, and people tried to get a hold on the paper they have because computers just kept on generating paper. Just to give you an idea, a full 5-drawer file cabinet can hold approximately 15,000 pieces of paper, and it takes up a lot of space. It takes up about 7.5 feet of space. You look at a file cabinet and say, well, it's not 7.5 feet, but when you open up a drawer, you need the room for that drawer to open up. So the average office employee spends a lot of time, whether he's looking up information or sharing information. It just takes a lot of time. So not only does paper take up space, but it takes a lot of time handling the paper. And the average office spends a lot of money to file documents, looking for lost and misfiled documents. It can take, and if you lost a document, to recreate it takes a lot of time, and all that costs money. So the absence of a proper document management system costs companies both time and money. So if your office looks like this, then you're taking your documents are taking up too much space. You're spending too much time searching for records. Your office efficiency could be improved if you had a document management system, and file security is an issue. How does that affect the cannabis and the hemp marketplace? Well, with as Arthur mentioned, there's to be a lot of regulations coming down from the government. And not only do you have all your normal office records, you're going to be, if you're a grower or you're selling, you have a lot of things that you have to keep record of, whether it's cultivation, analytics, track and trace, production. All these areas create paper. And the governments at time from time is want us to take a look, make sure you're doing everything they requested you do to handle the selling of cannabis. So you heard me use document management. So what exactly is a document management system? A document management system is just computer software. It kind of creates your electronic file cabinets. That's where all your documents would reside. It could be cloud-based, or it could be on premises. So depending on how your system, your CTOs or your chief information officer has set up your ERP systems, will depend on how you want to do it. A document management system really makes it more efficient, saving time and, again, money and space, and also providing security to the files. What are some of the advantages of using a document management system? Well, files are never misfiled, never out of file, never missing. So it increases office productivity. If you ever think about going to a file cabinet and you need retrieval of information, somebody may call, you need information, you either put their phone on hold, or you take their phone number, you call them back while you look for files. You go to the file cabinet and you find out something's missing or misfiled, sitting on somebody's desk, and then you have to call the person back. The other thing is that once you start digitizing, again, you're going to save a lot of expensive office real estate. You could also create a workflow. Maybe you have an invoice that comes in and it has to be authorized at various levels. When you digitize a document, you could set it up so that it would automatically notify the next person in the chain that that document is there, and that if you don't sign off on it by such a date and pay that invoice, you could lose discount or even lose a contract. So it's a great way of maintaining the way things are done in the office. It increases security to the files. Right now, anybody can go to a file cabinet or take out a piece of paper, photograph a piece of paper, whatever they have to do with it. But if you have it on a system with a document management system, you need password authorization, and the password authorization allows some people to read only. Some people have the ability to read and print or fax. Some people may be the manager and they have full control over the document. So security is much greater with an electronic system than a paper system. You could also control, let's say it's HR. Only certain people maybe just need their address. You don't want to see how much somebody's making. or maybe you don't want them to see your social security number. So there's a lot of ways to create security with a document management system. Not only that, it gives you the ability to review information from a remote location. So especially during COVID, wouldn't it be nice to have all your documents where you, no matter where you are, whether you're home or anywhere in the world, it could be web-based, or you can even search with an iPhone or a tablet, something of that nature. It also creates an audit trail, so you know who went into the file, what they did with it. You can control revisions, so that you can delete old revisions. You know what's going on exactly, making sure that somebody's looking at the most up-to-date information. And then, of course, backing up your paper files. Right now, if you had any type of major catastrophe, whether it be, say, a fire or flood, and you lost all your records, you'd be out of luck. But if you back up your computer, in essence, you're backing up all your paper files at the same time. So it provides another level of security. You never lose information because you can search by any parameter, whether it be by a text, a name, a number, a date, or any required information. So you'll really never lose information. You may just have a date and it'll list everything under that date. It may take a little longer to find some information, but it's better than never finding it at all. And then, of course, it's the area of postage. You can start emailing and fax directly from the computer rather than sending information out by postage. You save time on office printer costs. You can also create electronic forms, so documents can be sent directly by the computer, by email or fax. There's less money spent on office supplies, no file folders, no file cabinets. You start saving money in that direction as well. A distribution of information. Let's say you have many offices and HR wants to put out a new employee manual. They have to first print up the manual, bind the manual, then it costs the printing the manual, and then you have to wait for everybody to get it if you wanted to review it. But if it's electronic, you can distribute it automatically without going through all the other steps. And then, of course, with the regulations coming in place for cannabis, auditors will love it, and so will you, because you're able to find the information faster. You can give them a computer and say, sit down here, and you can control what they see, how they see it, and they'll be in and out faster. And then, of course, it's going green. It eliminates paper, saves trees, and improves the environment. So there's a lot of reasons why going paperless and using document management is good for your business. I just want to give you some final thoughts. Going paperless isn't just about scanning paper and saving it. It's to be used as an active file system. A lot of people say, you know what, I'll just scan my records because it'll save me some space, or I'll scan my records because it's backup. But if they use it as an active system where they're looking up information, sending information, retrieving information, you're going to save money. You get all the advantages of a paperless system. And the absence of a proper document management is going to cost the business time and money because your competitors are taking advantage of it. And as I said before, it's not only a good business decision, but it's good for the environment. And if you let customers and vendors know that you're paperless, then instead of them sending you paper all the time, they can email you the information or fax you the information. Document management systems now can take a fax, automatically set it into the right file folder. And most importantly, going paperless is not a sprint but a marathon. What I mean by that is you start by taking one area of your company, maybe it's accounts payables or HR. You put in a document management system for that area. You work with it, you get all the bugs out of the system, make sure it's doing everything you want it to do, you get to understand the system, and go to the next department. So it's not a sprint but a marathon. It takes time to install it if you want to go to create a paperless system throughout the company. And then our goal is not to change the way you do business, but to give you the tools to manage your business better. And I just want to thank everybody for their opportunity, and have everybody have a great day and stay safe. Kevin?
Ali, thank you very much for your presentation. Much appreciated. So we know, we know there are new companies being active in cannabis industry, and as per your observations before, many of them actually either on paper or they use they actually manage their data in an unstructured way. So we hope this to be informative and helpful to our attendees as well as companies in cannabis industry in New York State and Long Island. I appreciate it. Thank you, Marty, for your insights about going paperless. Okay, great. So we continue our panel discussion. Right after Joel's presentation, we'll have our Q&A session, just so you know. So I'd like to invite Joel from Quintel Business Consulting Company. So Joel is based in Colorado, and he works very close with a cannabis company in Colorado State. So we know Colorado is very active in cannabis industry right now. New York is getting ready in so many different ways, but we know there are things that we need to learn from an active cannabis company. And also, as Arthur mentioned earlier, there are different categories in the cannabis industry. So we simply summarize it from seed to sale, but simply there are growers, there are manufacturers, processors, and there are sellers. So basically three parts actually exist in the marketplace. But having said that, I'd like to invite Joel to our virtual stage. Let's learn from a real active cannabis company in Colorado and what we can learn in New York from this active company. And we may have some questions to Joel and our panelists, and we'll ask these questions in Q&A session right after Joel's presentation. Joel, why don't you take over the screen? I'll start sharing. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin. All right.
We can see your screen. You have 20 minutes, and I'll let you know when 5 minutes left. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you for having me today, Kevin, to help out with the introduction of and discussion of the cannabis industry. As Kevin had mentioned, we're based in Colorado, and the company that I will be talking about today that we have been working with is Panacea Life Sciences. And so I am a consultant to Panacea, and I am with the company Quintel Management Consulting. So just a little bit about that. Quintel is founded in April of 2002, a Colorado women-owned business, and we're focused on value creation through process improvement and utilization of technology. So we have worked with a number of different customers in the public and private sectors, and being that we are in Colorado, of course, that has been part of the motivation to get involved with what is happening in the cannabis industry, since Colorado was on the forefront of the regulation and basically legalization of cannabis going back to about 2014. So over a number of different years, and of course have continued to expand and improve and address challenges within the state of Colorado to be able to allow companies to grow and thrive, and really has had a significant impact on the economy and the overall situation in the state of Colorado. So in terms of Panacea Life Sciences, they are focused on cultivating everyday wellness. Panacea is a little bit different than companies that you may think of within the cannabis space, as Panacea focuses on really the science of the cannabis plant and how the plant can really help the overall wellness of an individual. So the focus is not so much on the recreational use of cannabis, which of course is the primary reason for a lot of the concern that has been expressed and that exists in the communities today, but more focused on the use of the cannabis plant as basically a natural alternative to traditional medical medicine that may be offered for certain types of ailments and situations that people have. So there's a lot of work to be done in that area to really understand the full benefits of the cannabis plant, but that's really the focus of what Panacea has been doing. And Panacea also is unique in the sense that they do not um, utilize the THC portion of the cannabis plant. They focus on the CBD, CBG, and other cannabinoids that exist within the hemp plant. So vision of Panacea is to become the leading cannabinoid company in the US and globally, and more than just a CBD company, but truly trying to have an impact on communities and individuals and increasing overall wellness for individuals. So just in terms of the vertical integration, so in the previous presentation, talking about the different licenses, for example, that would be available within the state of New York and restrictions on the different types of licensees and processors, cultivators, for example, not being able to participate at the retail level, all of those types of regulations being put in place to manage the participants across the value chain. Panacea, again, being a little bit unique or different in that we are, Panacea is not subject to that type of regulation because of the fact that they do not include the THC portion of the plant in the products that are being produced and are sold through Panacea. So Panacea is a vertically integrated company, scientifically driven, medically focused to across the entire value chain, which includes the production or cultivation of the plants and then moving into the extraction process, step 2. So step 1, moving to step 2, and then taking the what's been extracted from the plant, the oil basically that's produced, and being able to formulate that and basically manufacture products utilizing those ingredients, and then combining that with medical delivery technologies, different ways of applying. So you have ingestibles and topicals and other types of ways that basically the products that are being produced can be utilized, and always being able to consult with healthcare professionals and as part of the scientifically driven, looking for opportunities to further explore and really complete valid research into the benefits of the hemp plant and the associated products that are produced. And again, overall, being able to then have an impact on individuals and patients and being able to provide an alternative to traditional medicine. So Panacea, as we have discussed, is focused on both extraction and manufacturing of the business, and also the selling of the retail products. So from an experience perspective, certainly Panacea has had to address many of the challenges associated with extraction, manufacturing, selling across the value chain that basically any company that is getting into the cannabis industry is going to have to experience based upon the license or the area of focus that a company may take or may decide to pursue. within the industry. So just in terms of the types of equipment, basically, or the manufacturing process that's utilized. So we talk about technology driven. Certainly within the cannabis industry, you have soft technology, such as what was previously described in terms of paperless technology and being able to manage the entire business without producing paper. Quintel has been a partner with Bimser International, which is Kevin's company, since 2016. And we have worked closely with Bimser to develop technologies for managing the business, enterprise technologies. So being able to utilize an ERP system, for example, for the benefit of all of the different areas of the business, from production to sales to distribution to managing HR, managing overall finances, producing financial reports, all of those requirements that any company would have. And then also technology in terms of the type of equipment that would be used for the actual extraction or manufacturing processes. So this is where there really is a convergence of science and technology when you are having to make a significant investment in the equipment that is required to be able to take a plant that has been produced on at the farm, basically, and then being able to extract out of that the beneficial ingredients, and then turning that into an ingredient that can be further processed and turned into something that a consumer can either consume or apply to actually realize the benefit of the product. So it's been a significant learning experience for all of us that have worked on the Panacea project, and also within the industry, just because the technology is sophisticated, but then also changing. And so you are dealing with a number of different suppliers who are, developing these technologies, and many of the technologies that are being developed are, first time use or showcase or proof of concept, and being able to leverage those technologies and utilize them to their maximum efficiencies within the production environment or the manufacturing environment has been one of those real challenges, and one of the lessons learned from the experience that we have had at Panacea. So just in terms of all of the different ways that the CBD or other elements of the hemp plant could be utilized, you can see that there's a number of different issues that can be addressed and are being studied to really be able to determine the benefit or the impact of these types of products on the body. So one of the issues that certainly has been in the news and talked about frequently is the fact that there isn't a lot of real evidence or research to back up the claims that companies could be making about how these products benefit these different issues. And so that's, again, one of the challenges of being a participant in this industry, is just the overall impact or issues at the federal level. For example, with the FDA monitoring and making sure that companies aren't making claims that are not valid or provable. So there's really a lot of sensitivity to that by participants to not be called out, essentially, by the FDA for those types of actions that could be taken. So as the research continues to develop, Of course, that may change, but at this point, that certainly is a challenge in the industry. So there's also a real issue with customer education. And so, for example, at Panacea, as I had explained previously, the products that are being produced do not contain THC, but just the mention of cannabis to a potential customer implies that THC is included, and customers have a reaction to that, either positive or negative. But there really is an education issue for customers to understand the full range of the type of products that can be produced within the cannabis industry and used for different purposes. And whether or not they contain THC, of course, is a very important element of that. So in terms of Panacea, Panacea has introduced new retail locations, for example, in the Denver airport and in malls around Denver. And that's a recent development for Panacea to be able to sell products directly within those types of consumer outlets, basically, that where you're dealing with customers directly and really learning what it is that customers, what their impressions are of cannabis products, and being surprised, for example, that those types of products are sold at certain locations, not understanding that the products that are being sold are perfectly legal and not subject to the same type of regulation that most customers think of when they think about the cannabis industry. So that has been an ongoing challenge in terms of overall education of the consumer base and understanding how different types of products can be utilized. So other issues, of course, the compliance issue and local regulation. So again, as was stated previously, in the state of New York, regulations are being developed at both the state and local levels to be able to manage the retail outlets, for example, and whether or not they would be allowed. So that continues to be a challenge, certainly for any participant in the cannabis industry, and being able to negotiate those types of regulations. And that also would include taxation. So different municipalities, different states have different taxing structures for this type of product for this industry. So that's another challenge, is adapting and staying on top of all of those types of basically regulations that happen at the federal level. I talked about the FDA, but certainly the banking issue continues to be significant, and there have been some developments in Washington, D.C. regarding the federal legalization of marijuana, for example, which would then free up banks to be able to allow for interstate commerce. And at this point, that's not allowed. And so there is a big issue for participants with being able to find financial institutions that will support the type of transaction activity that is required, of course, for selling products within the cannabis industry. So employees is another area that certainly is challenging for being able to attract new talent, basically, to a new industry, and also being in a startup environment, having a number of, just having employees come and go is certainly a challenge that also is being experienced within the industry. So overall, being that it is an industry that is, of course, just developing, and people are learning how to basically accommodate all of these different aspects of it, it certainly has been an exciting learning curve to be on from all of those different angles. And our experience has been with regulated industries, and certainly the cannabis industry is highly regulated, just in a very different way than what we would have experienced with other regulated industries such as utilities in the past. So just quickly, going to the Panacea website, give a little bit of an idea of the different types of products that are being developed. We have soft gels, tablets, topicals, skincare products, tinctures, edibles, patches, pets. So we're not just talking about smoking. As a matter of fact, we currently don't have a product with Panacea that can be smoked. All of the products are either ingested or applied externally. So certainly feel free to visit the Panacea website to learn more about the different types of products that are used, and also in terms of the type of activities that are included with a vertically integrated type of company, from including the extraction and manufacturing. Just to give you an idea, we have a farm that is located in the mountains of Colorado, and this is where the actual hemp plants are grown. And so from this location in the mountains of Colorado, basically the planting starts in April, May timeframe, grows throughout the summer, get to September is when you would start to look at harvesting. The actual timing of when you harvest is very critical in order to make sure that you maximize the CBD content of the plants and not include any THC in the production of those plants, given that Panacea's focus is not to include THC. So all of this is, like I said, very much a learning experience in how to maximize the efficiencies and the benefits of basically the product that is being pursued through the hemp plant, and combining all of the new different types of technology with the different and changing regulations that impact the industry all at the same time. So with that, Kevin, I will wrap it up and turn it back to you.
Joel, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Our also timing is great, so we have time for Q&A, as I promised earlier in the meeting. So let me put my share screen, and then we can ask our questions to our attendees. Joel, thank you again for your presentation. Very educational for us. I mean, learning from an active company in a very active state in cannabis industry is very, very helpful, very educational for us. So much appreciated. We have questions. So I'd like to open the floor for questions to our attendees. You can unmute your microphone and ask your questions to our panelists. As an alternative, you can type in the chat box. I received some questions in the chat box. I have some already, but if you'd like to ask your questions, please feel free. It is time to ask questions. So any questions from our attendees? You can unmute your microphone if you like. Okay, in the meantime, I can maybe also ask some of the questions to our panelists. And as I mentioned, if you have questions, you can ask directly by unmuting your microphone, or you can type in the chat box. So one of the questions actually for Artur that I received. I mean, from what we actually learned, actually regulations are coming up. Some of actually exist in some practices, some actually coming up. So things are actually evolving. So, where to get the latest information about regulations and law about the cannabis industry?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? So the question was where to get more information?
Yeah, where to get the information about cannabis industry, about regulations, law, and
right. So, So what New York State has done at this point we have essentially two guidelines right now. One is you have the actual the actual legislation that was passed, right? So it's pretty lengthy, and it what I did today was sort of really simplify a lot of what it says, but it's voluminous pages of the framework that is being developed. And then the second part is New York State has arranged for a website for the Office of Cannabis Management, and that that's the office that will be responsible for developing the regulations that we're all sort of waiting for. So they have very limited information on their website right now, but I could certainly share that link, for anybody who wants to click around and see what's out there. But right now, those two are really the main sources of information that we have available as things are being developed.
Appreciate it. Thank you. I also know that Campolo and Middleton and McCormick's website is very active. I know you share really informative content as well on your website, so it may also be helpful as well, I believe. Also,
that's and I appreciate you calling that out. One of the things we're doing is, as we're closely tracking what's happening, and as things are being developed, and have frequent updates, and we'll be developing our blog on the issues as well. I can certainly share that link, as well as as we share the information and really digest it and make it easier for everyone to understand. As so some of the stuff gets a little complex and tedious to get through.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Arthur. Also, another question for Arthur is, how long does it take to have license for cannabis operations? You mentioned some license types.
Yeah. So again, it's that part of it we don't know yet.
Okay.
We're waiting on the regulations. We just all we really know right now is what type of licenses will be available,
Okay.
how many, how long they'll last for, how long the application process will be. The specific details of the application, a lot of that stuff is still up in the air, and hopefully the way the management office deals with it is they roll it out on an ongoing basis, and so we'll be able to have more information down the road. But right now, a lot of the details that people want to know, which is what do I do, how do I do it, and when do I do it, that's sort of a big black hole right now.
I appreciate it. So we'll wait and see and follow up then. By the way, to our attendees, I also mentioned our panelists' email address and their websites on the screen. So I'm sure we're going to be continuing these discussions, conversations with them. We may have some questions, so we can stay in touch and in touch with our panelists moving forward. So one of the questions about Joel. So Joel, actually, myself, I was also taking notes when I was listening to you. So what type of challenges there are in the marketplace, especially in the cannabis point of view. So we talked about technology, customer education, regulations, taxations, employee retention, FDA requirements, compliance requirements. These are some of them that I took note of. So having said that, there is also a very good question from one of our attendees. So Joel, this question is for you. So from the time Colorado approved the regulations, how long did it take for a company to become operational in cannabis industry, and what did they do to operate before regulations were approved? So what we are going through right now in New York, Colorado also experienced that before. So that's a good question, what a company should do before regulations were approved and basically set.
Well, I would say that there's a lot of work to be done in terms of the application process to be able to obtain a license, typically. So that would be, you really need to be looking at how the business is set up or will be set up once a license is obtained. So of course, you can't actually produce or sell the product until you have the license, but getting everything in place so that as soon as the license is obtained, you're able to then basically participate and transact within the industry with that license. So in terms of the licensing process, it typically is months that it would take to obtain a license, but over that time period, you really need to be focusing on setting up the business and getting it ready so that as soon as the license is approved and paid for, basically, you can then do business.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Joe. Is there any other questions from our attendees? You can unmute your microphone and ask your question, or you can put it in the chat box. You can write to me directly, or you can put it in the public chat box. Any way you like it. One of the questions that actually I received is for Marty. So yes, cannabis industry is gonna be developing, but we all know that some companies in hemp industry, hemp field, they are getting ready for cannabis industry as well. Basically, we are all waiting for the regulations, but they are active in hemp. So having said that, what will be the most vital business functions to run paperless initially in business operations, you will say?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Oh yeah, sure, I can. So right now there is hemp practices in the marketplace, hemp companies, right? So some of them also they are waiting for regulations to be active in cannabis industry. They are in hemp, they are practicing hemp, but they are waiting for cannabis regulations to be set. So moving forward, what will be the most important or vital business functions to run on paperless, you will say?
Well, what I would do is I bring in a system and start with one area. Maybe it would be for accounts payables and or production, and start in one area. Start scanning what you have now, getting used to working with the documentation, so that when the regulations come in place, you'll understand how the systems work, and you'll be ready to start scanning your documents.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mike. So we are coming to, I think, yeah, our time is up. So before we end, some final thoughts. Arthur, is there anything that you'd like to share before we end our meeting as our panelists?
Sure. I just want to say, our focus on the cannabis industry really sprouted from, working with businesses over the years on the issues that we're seeing now with the cannabis industry, which is employment, corporate issues, corporate structuring, advising folks on things like, licensing for women-owned businesses and stuff like that. So, we're certainly seeing opportunities for helping folks, get ahead, with the impending regulations coming, down the road. And so, anyone interested, we're happy to, talk more and, provide more detail.
Thank you, Arthur. Much appreciated. Thank you for your help, support, and sharing educational content. Marty, is there anything that you'd like to share as final thoughts before we end our meeting?
Basically what I'd like to say is that anybody that's interested in going paperless, as I said before, just consider it a marathon, not a sprint. Start slowly, get to understand one department, how the software works, and don't try and take on too much at one time. Go slowly.
Thank you, Marty. Much appreciated. And thank you for sharing informative content with us today. Joel, any final thoughts from you?
Well, I guess my final thought would just be to encourage everybody to educate yourself on the products and the industry and the types of benefits that can be realized through the industry. So there's a lot of focus on other aspects of it, but really something that everybody can do is just start learning about what's available, maybe even trying a product or two, but just becoming educated on what these products actually are and what they can do.
Joel, thank you very much for your help, for sharing the content, and also letting us know what an active company in Colorado is doing, what were the challenges, and how we have been addressing that. Very helpful for us. Thank you very much. So I'd like to thank our panelists for being with us and sharing an educational content with us. Also, I'd like to thank our attendees for your time and for your interest. As I mentioned earlier, this is the first meeting of series of future cannabis meetings that will be facilitated, organized, and moving forward. So I'm really happy for the interest from your side. And okay, I think I hit the Yes, so I'd like to thank our panelists for their time and for sharing the content. I'd like to thank our attendees for your time. This is the first meeting of our series for Future Cannabis meeting series, so we're going to have more moving forward. We are looking forward to seeing you in our coming HALI Manufacturing and International Trade Committee meetings. Thank you very much and have a nice day.